The blood froze in crimson streaks across the white snow, and Zachariah Crawford knew that whoever had left that trail was either dead or dying in the blizzard that howled through the Sierra Nevada mountains on that bitter February evening in 1878. He had been riding back to Independence, California, after spending 3 weeks moving cattle through the high passes before the worst of winter settled in. The storm had come on sudden and fierce, turning the world into a whirling mass of white that made it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. His horse, a sturdy buckskin mare named Sage, had nearly stumbled over the body half buried in a snowdrift beside the narrow mountain trail. At first, Zachariah thought it might be a deer that had been taken down by wolves, but when he dismounted and brushed away the accumulating snow, his heart lurched in his chest. It was a woman, her dark hair matted with blood, her face so pale it was nearly the same color as the snow surrounding her. Her lips had taken on a bluish tint, and her clothes were soaked through, offering no protection against the killing cold. Zachariah pressed 2 fingers against her throat, searching for a pulse. For a long, terrible moment, he felt nothing. And then there it was, faint and thready, but present. She was alive, but barely. He could see the bruises already forming on her face, the split in her lip, the way her knuckles were scraped raw. Someone had hurt her badly, had beaten her, and left her here to die in the storm. Rage burned hot in his chest, but there was no time for that now. If he did not get her warm and dry soon, she would be dead within the hour. The nearest shelter was an old trapper's cabin he had used before, about half a mile further up the trail. It was not much, just 4 walls and a roof, but it had a fireplace and would keep the wind out. Zachariah worked quickly, knowing every second counted. He pulled off his heavy coat and wrapped it around the woman, then lifted her as gently as he could. She was lighter than he expected, all sharp angles and bones beneath her wet clothing. He settled her across Sage's saddle, keeping one arm around her to hold her in place as he led the horse through the deepening snow. The wind screamed through the trees, and ice crystals stung his face like tiny needles. Without his coat, the cold bit through his wool shirt and long underwear. But Zachariah gritted his teeth and pushed forward. He had survived worse than this. The woman in his arms might not have that luxury if he did not hurry. Sage seemed to understand the urgency, placing each hoof carefully despite the treacherous conditions. The trail disappeared entirely in places, buried under fresh snow. But Zachariah knew these mountains well. He had been working cattle in this territory for the better part of 6 years, ever since he had left Missouri at 20 years old, with nothing but a horse and the clothes on his back. When the dark outline of the cabin finally appeared through the swirling white, relief flooded through him. He tied Sage under the small overhang that served as a lean-to, making sure she had access to the sheltered side where the wind would not cut so fierce. Then he kicked open the cabin door and carried the woman inside. The interior was dark and cold, filled with the musty smell of disuse, but it was dry. That was what mattered. Zachariah laid the woman on the narrow cot in the corner and immediately set about building a fire. His fingers were stiff with cold, making the work clumsy, but he had done this countless times before. Within minutes, flames were crackling in the stone fireplace, pushing back the darkness and beginning to warm the small space. Only then did he allow himself to really look at the woman he had found. She was young, probably no more than 23 or 24, with delicate features that would have been beautiful, if not for the damage that had been done to her face. Someone had hit her hard, multiple times. Her right eye was swollen nearly shut, and there was a gash along her hairline that had bled considerably. Her hands told their own story of struggle, nails broken and fingers scraped, as if she had fought back hard against her attacker. Zachariah felt that rage building again, hot and fierce. What kind of man would do this to a woman? But anger would not save her life. Action would. He needed to get her out of those wet clothes before hypothermia claimed her. The situation was uncomfortable, improper by every social standard he knew, but leaving her in frozen clothing would kill her just as surely as the beating she had endured. Zachariah moved to the door and retrieved his saddlebags from Sage, along with the bedroll he always carried. Inside the bags, he found a clean shirt and his spare pair of long underwear. They would be far too large for her, but they were dry and warm. Working as quickly and respectfully as possible, Zachariah removed her sodden dress and undergarments, keeping his eyes averted as much as he could while still accomplishing the necessary task. More bruises revealed themselves, dark marks across her ribs and arms. Someone had hurt her systematically, brutally. He dressed her in his dry clothes, then wrapped her in every blanket he could find in the cabin, adding his bedroll on top. The fire was burning strong now, filling the small space with warmth. He pulled the cot as close to the hearth as was safe, and then set about checking her injuries more carefully. The head wound concerned him most. It had stopped bleeding, but he knew head injuries could be deceptive. He cleaned it as best he could, with water from his canteen and a relatively clean cloth from his saddlebag. The woman did not stir, did not make a sound. Her breathing was shallow, but steady. All he could do now was wait and hope she would wake. Zachariah fed more wood to the fire and settled into the cabin's only chair, a rickety thing that creaked under his weight. Outside, the blizzard continued its assault on the mountains, wind shrieking around the corners of the cabin. He was grateful he had found this place when he did. Another hour in that storm, and they both might have been in serious trouble. As the adrenaline of the rescue began to fade, exhaustion crept in. He had been in the saddle since before dawn, and the physical exertion of the last hour had taken its toll, but he could not sleep, not yet. He needed to watch her, to make sure she kept breathing. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Zachariah kept the fire fed and checked on the woman regularly, pressing his fingers to her throat to feel her pulse, watching the rise and fall of her chest beneath the blankets. Gradually, color began to return to her face, replacing that deathly pallor. Her lips lost some of their blue tint. These were good signs, but still she did not wake. As the night deepened and the storm continued to rage, Zachariah found himself studying her face, wondering who she was and what had brought her to such a terrible fate on this mountain. She had calluses on her hands, the kind that came from hard work. Her clothes, though ruined now, had been well made, speaking of at least some means. The dress had been a deep green wool, practical for mountain living. She was not some fancy city woman caught unprepared by the wilderness. She belonged here, or at least knew how to survive here under normal circumstances. But there was nothing normal about being beaten nearly to death and left in a blizzard. As the fire burned low, Zachariah added more wood and allowed himself to doze in the chair, jerking awake every few minutes to check on his patient. Dawn came slowly, the darkness outside gradually giving way to a gray half-light that filtered through the cabin's single window. The storm had not abated. If anything, it seemed to have intensified. Snow was piled high against the door, and the wind continued its relentless howling. They would not be going anywhere today. Zachariah stood and stretched, his muscles protesting the uncomfortable night in the chair. He checked on Sage, who was huddled in the lee of the cabin, and gave her some of the grain he always carried in his saddlebags. Then he returned inside to tend the fire and heat water for coffee. As he worked, he heard a sound from the cot, a soft moan that made him spin around. The woman's eyes were fluttering, consciousness trying to break through. Zachariah moved to her side, kneeling beside the cot. Her eyelids lifted slowly, and he found himself looking into eyes the color of dark honey, confused and clouded with pain. She stared at him for a long moment, and he could see the fear beginning to build as she registered that she was in an unfamiliar place with a strange man. "Easy now," Zachariah said softly, keeping his voice calm and gentle. "You are safe. I found you in the snow last night. You were hurt pretty bad." She tried to speak, but only a hoarse whisper emerged. Zachariah grabbed his canteen and carefully helped her take a few small sips of water. She swallowed with obvious difficulty, wincing as she did. After a moment, she tried again. "Where?" The single word was barely audible. "Old Trapper's cabin, about 10 miles north of Independence," Zachariah told her. "There is a blizzard outside. We are snowed in for now, but you are safe here. I promise you that." She studied his face with those pain-filled eyes, and he could see her trying to assess whether she could trust him. Slowly, as if the movement caused her great pain, she lifted one hand to touch her face, fingers exploring the swollen tissue and cuts. Memory seemed to flood back then, and her eyes widened with what looked like terror. "He tried to kill me," she whispered, and tears began to stream down her bruised cheeks. "Benjamin tried to kill me." Zachariah felt his jaw clench. "Who is Benjamin?" "My husband." The words were laced with such pain and bitterness that they seemed to poison the air. "He found out I was planning to leave him. He found the money I had hidden, the papers I had gotten from the lawyer in town. He went into a rage." She started to shake, and Zachariah was not sure if it was from cold or shock or the memory of what had been done to her. He pulled the blankets up higher around her shoulders. "You do not have to talk about it right now," he said. "You need to rest, to heal." But she shook her head as if she needed to get the words out, needed to make him understand. "He beat me. When I tried to fight back, to run, he just kept hitting me. I thought he was going to kill me right there in our house. But then he dragged me outside and threw me on a horse. He took me up into the mountains. He said if I wanted to leave so badly, then I could die up here where no one would ever find me. He hit me one more time, and I do not remember anything after that. I woke up here." The story made Zachariah's blood boil. He had known men like that, men who thought their wives were property to be controlled and disposed of at will. He had always despised such cowards. "He will not touch you again," he said firmly. "I give you my word on that." She studied him again with those careful, assessing eyes. "I do not even know your name." "Zachariah Crawford. Most folks call me Zach. I work cattle in these mountains, have for the past 6 years." "Catherine," she said softly. "Catherine Porter. Kate. Well, Kate Porter, you are lucky to be alive. Another hour in that storm, and you would not have made it." "Maybe that would have been easier," she said, her voice cracking. "What do I have to go back to? If Benjamin does not kill me, the shame will. Everyone in Independence knows I am his wife. No one will believe me if I tell them what he did. They will say I am making it up, trying to sully his good name." Zachariah frowned. "What makes his name so good?" "He owns the largest general store in town. He sits on the town council. Everyone thinks he is a pillar of the community, a good Christian man." The bitterness in her voice was palpable. "They do not see what happens behind closed doors. They do not see the bruises I hide beneath long sleeves and high collars." The picture she painted was all too familiar to Zachariah. He had seen it before, respectable men who presented one face to the world and another to their families. "How long has this been going on?" "We have been married for 2 years. It started about 6 months in, just small things at first. He would grab my arm too hard if I disagreed with him, or shove me if dinner was not ready on time. It got worse over time, much worse. I started saving money when I could, hiding a few coins here and there from the household expenses. It took me over a year to save enough to leave. I was going to take the stage to Sacramento, start over somewhere he could not find me." Her voice broke. "I was so close. Just a few more days, and I would have been gone." Zachariah felt a deep anger toward this Benjamin Porter, a man he had never met but already despised. "Listen to me, Kate. You are going to get through this. When this storm breaks and we can get back to town, we will figure out what to do. There are laws against what he did to you." She laughed. But there was no humor in it, only despair. Laws written by men, enforced by men, for the benefit of men. I am his wife. Most folks think a man has the right to discipline his wife as he sees fit. Zachariah wanted to argue with her, but he knew she was right. The law was rarely on a woman's side in situations like this. Still, he could not just accept that this Porter fellow would get away with attempted murder. "Then we will find another way. But first, you need to heal. Can you tell me where you hurt the most?" Kate closed her eyes for a moment, as if taking inventory of her body. "My head is pounding. My ribs hurt when I breathe. Everything hurts, really." "I need to check those ribs," Zachariah said. "Make sure nothing is broken. Is that all right?" She nodded, though he could see the wariness in her eyes. He understood. She had no reason to trust any man right now, least of all a stranger. But she allowed him to gently press along her ribcage through the blankets and oversized shirt. She gasped and went pale when he reached her left side. "I think you might have a cracked rib or two," he said. "Nothing I can do about that except wrap them and make sure you stay still. They will heal on their own with time." "How do you know about doctoring?" she asked. "I do not really. But when you work cattle in the mountains, you learn to patch yourself up. I have had my share of broken bones and injuries. You figure things out, or you die." Over the next hour, Zachariah did what he could to make Kate comfortable. He wrapped her ribs with strips torn from an old shirt he found in the cabin, heated snow for drinking water, and made a thin soup from some dried beef and vegetables he had in his supplies. Kate managed to eat a little, though every swallow seemed to pain her. Then, exhaustion claimed her again, and she slipped back into sleep. The storm continued through that entire day and into the next night. Zachariah kept the fire burning, rationed his supplies, and watched over Kate as she drifted in and out of consciousness. When she was awake, they talked in brief snatches. He learned that she was 22 years old, originally from Virginia, and had come west with her parents when she was 16. They had died of cholera 2 years later, leaving her alone in a rough mining town with no family and few options. Benjamin Porter had seemed like a godsend at the time, a successful businessman offering her security and respectability. She had married him more out of desperation than love, and the mistake had nearly cost her everything. In turn, Zachariah told her about his own life. He was 26, had left Missouri after his father died, and the family farm was sold to pay debts. He had drifted west looking for work and found it in the cattle business. He had no wife, no children, just sage and the mountains and the freedom to go where he pleased. It was a solitary life, but it suited him. He had never been much for town living, or the complications that came with it. As they talked through those long hours, something unexpected began to grow between them. At first, it was simply the natural connection between two people thrown together by circumstance. But gradually, Zachariah found himself drawn to Kate in ways that surprised him. Despite everything she had endured, there was a strength in her, a resilience that he admired. She did not wallow in self-pity or expect him to solve all her problems. She was practical, clear-eyed about her situation, and determined to survive. He found himself studying the way the firelight caught in her dark hair, the way her eyes lit up when she managed a small smile despite her injuries. He found himself wanting to hear her voice, to know her thoughts, to make her feel safe in a way she clearly had not felt for a very long time. For Kate's part, she was acutely aware of how different Zachariah was from Benjamin. Where her husband had been quick to anger and brutal in his control, Zachariah was patient and gentle. He treated her with a respect she had almost forgotten existed. When he helped her sit up to drink or adjusted her blankets, his touch was careful, never presumptuous. He gave her space when she needed it and offered comfort when she seemed to want it. She found herself trusting him in a way that should have terrified her, given what she had just escaped. But something in his steady gray eyes and quiet competence made her feel that she was truly safe for the first time in years. On the third morning, Kate woke to find the quality of light in the cabin had changed. The howling wind had stopped, and through the window she could see pale sunlight glinting off snow. The storm had finally passed. Zachariah was already up, preparing to venture outside to assess the situation. He looked over when he heard her stirring. "Storm broke," he said. "I am going to dig out the door and check on Sage. How are you feeling?" "Better," Kate said, and it was partially true. The pounding in her head had subsided to a dull ache, and though her ribs still hurt, the sharp pain had lessened. "Stronger." Zachariah nodded, pleased. "Good. We need to talk about what happens next." He went outside, and Kate could hear him digging through the snow that had piled against the door. When he came back in, stamping snow from his boots, his expression was serious. "Snow is deep, 3 feet at least in places. It is going to be slow going, but I think we can make it back to Independence by tonight if we start soon. The question is, what do you want to do? If we go back to town, your husband is going to know you survived." Kate had been thinking about this very question through the long hours of the night. "I cannot go back to that house, but I have nowhere else to go." Zachariah was quiet for a moment, then said, "There is a widow woman on the edge of town, Mrs. Sarah Winters. She takes in boarders sometimes, women mostly. I have heard she is a good sort, does not ask too many questions. You could stay there while we figure out what to do about your husband." "I have no money," Kate said bitterly. "Benjamin took everything when he found my savings." "I can help with that," Zachariah said, "at least to get you started." Kate shook her head firmly. "You have already saved my life. I cannot take your money too." "Consider it a loan then, if it makes you feel better. You can pay me back when you are on your feet." He met her eyes steadily. "Kate, I am not going to leave you with no options. That is not how I was raised." The kindness in his voice made tears sting Kate's eyes. She blinked them back, not wanting to appear weak. "Why are you helping me? You do not even know me." Zachariah considered the question. "Because it is the right thing to do, and because I have seen what happens when good people turn away from someone in need. It does not end well for anyone." He paused, then added more softly, "And maybe because I think you deserve better than what you have gotten." Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went deeper than words. Kate felt it settle in her chest, warm and unexpected. She had been so focused on survival, on escape, that she had not allowed herself to think about what might come after. But looking at Zachariah now, seeing the genuine concern in his face, she felt something she had not experienced in a very long time. Hope. They prepared to leave as the sun climbed higher in the crystalline sky. Kate was still wearing Zachariah's spare clothes, as her dress was beyond salvaging. He had dried it by the fire, but it was torn and stained with blood. She rolled up the sleeves and pant legs of his clothing and cinched the waist with a piece of rope. She looked ridiculous, but at least she was warm. Zachariah helped her outside, supporting her when she swayed with dizziness. 3 days in bed had left her weak, and her injuries made every movement an effort. Sage regarded them with patient brown eyes as Zachariah saddled her. There was no question of Kate riding alone in her condition. Zachariah mounted first, then reached down to help Kate up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her cheek against his broad back. Even through the layers of clothing, she could feel the warmth of him, the solid strength. It made her feel secure in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. The ride down the mountain was slow and treacherous. The snow was deep, and the trail was obscured in many places. Sage picked her way carefully, and Zachariah guided her with the skill of someone who knew these mountains intimately. Kate dozed against his back, exhaustion claiming her despite the cold and discomfort. When she woke, the sun was low in the sky, and they were descending into the valley where Independence lay. The town appeared gradually through the pine trees, a collection of wooden buildings clustered along the valley floor. Smoke rose from chimneys, and even from a distance Kate could hear the sounds of normal life continuing. Dogs barking, someone chopping wood, the ring of a hammer on an anvil. It all seemed surreal after what she had been through. As they drew closer, Kate felt tension building in her body. Benjamin was somewhere in that town. He thought she was dead, and when he learned otherwise, what would he do? Zachariah seemed to sense her fear. "We are going straight to Mrs. Winter's house," he said over his shoulder. "It is on the far edge of town. With luck, no one will see us, and we can figure out our next move before anyone knows you are back." But luck was not with them. As they rode down the main street, staying to the shadows as much as possible, a man emerged from the saloon and stopped dead in his tracks. He stared at Kate with wide eyes, then turned and ran back inside, no doubt to spread the word. Kate felt her heart sink. Within minutes, everyone would know she was alive. Zachariah cursed under his breath and urged Sage into a faster walk. They reached Mrs. Winter's house just as people began emerging from buildings, pointing and staring. The house was a neat, 2-story structure painted white with blue shutters. Zachariah dismounted and helped Kate down, keeping a protective arm around her as he knocked firmly on the door. The woman who answered was in her 50s, with silver-streaked brown hair pulled back in a practical bun, and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Those eyes took in Kate's battered face, the oversized men's clothing, and Zachariah's protective stance in a single glance. "Sarah Winters," she said by way of introduction, "and you look like you need help. My name is Zachariah Crawford. This is Kate Porter. She needs a safe place to stay. I can pay for her room and board." Mrs. Winter's eyes sharpened. Kate Porter, Benjamin Porter's wife? The one who has been missing for 3 days? "Yes, madam," Kate said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Well then," Mrs. Winters said, stepping aside, "you had better come in quickly before the whole town descends on us. I have been hearing quite a tale about how you ran off in the night and got lost in the storm." Kate and Zachariah exchanged a glance as they entered the warm, comfortable house. So, Benjamin had been spreading a story. Of course he had. He would never admit to what he had actually done. Mrs. Winters led them into a cozy sitting room and gestured for Kate to sit. Then she stood with her arms crossed, studying Kate's face with clinical precision. That is not the face of someone who got lost in a storm. That is the face of someone who was beaten, severely. The direct statement took Kate by surprise, and tears welled up before she could stop them. Mrs. Winters' expression softened, and she knelt beside Kate's chair, taking her hands gently. "Oh, my dear girl, I had my suspicions about that husband of yours. Too charming by half, that one, and charm like that usually hides something ugly." She looked up at Zachariah. "Tell me what happened." Zachariah related the story of finding Kate in the snow, leaving out the more intimate details of caring for her. Mrs. Winters listened with a grim expression, nodding occasionally. When he finished, she stood and straightened her apron with brisk efficiency. "Well, the first thing we need to do is get Doc Morrison over here to look at you properly. The second thing is to contact Marshal Thorne. What your husband did is attempted murder, plain and simple." "The Marshal is Benjamin's friend," Kate said dully. "They play cards every Thursday night." "Mrs." Winter's jaw set in a hard line. "Be that as it may, the Marshal is sworn to uphold the law. Let us see if he's willing to do his job. And if he is not, well, I have friends too. We will make sure this does not get swept under the rug." Over the next few hours, Mrs. Winters proved to be a force of nature. She sent her hired man to fetch the doctor and the marshal, set up Kate in a comfortable room upstairs, and produced a dress that would fit Kate well enough for the moment. When Dr. Morrison arrived, a kindly older man with gentle hands and a no-nonsense demeanor, he examined Kate thoroughly and confirmed what Zachariah had suspected. 2 cracked ribs, severe bruising, a mild concussion, and various other injuries consistent with a severe beating. He wrote it all down in careful detail, his face grave. Marshal Thorne arrived as the doctor was finishing up. He was a big man in his mid-40s, with a thick mustache and a star pinned to his vest. His eyes were guarded as he entered Mrs. Winters' parlor and saw Kate sitting there, very much alive. Zachariah stood behind her chair, his presence a silent statement of protection. "Mrs. Porter," the marshal said slowly, "I am glad to see you alive. Your husband has been beside himself with worry. He said you left the house 3 nights ago after an argument and never came back. He thought you had died in the storm." "That is a lie," Kate said, and she was proud that her voice did not shake. "He beat me unconscious and left me in the mountains to die. If Mr. Crawford had not found me, I would be dead." The marshal's expression hardened. "That is a serious accusation." "It is the truth." Kate stood, wincing at the pain in her ribs, and began unbuttoning the high collar of the borrowed dress. She pulled it down to reveal the bruises that mottled her neck and shoulders, the clear imprint of fingers where Benjamin had choked her. "He did this. He has been hurting me for the better part of 2 years, and when I tried to leave him, he decided to kill me instead." Dr. Morrison stepped forward. "I have documented her injuries, Marshal. They are consistent with a severe beating. These are not injuries that come from falling or getting lost in a storm. Someone did this to her deliberately." The marshal looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Benjamin said you two had an argument. He said you were hysterical, that you ran off before he could stop you. And you believed him without question, Mrs. Winters said sharply, without even considering that there might be another side to the story. "Tom Thorne, I have known you for 15 years. Do not let me discover that you are the kind of man who turns a blind eye to violence against women just because the perpetrator sits on the town council." The marshal flushed. "Now, Sarah, that is not fair. Is it not? Then prove me wrong. Do your job. Arrest Benjamin Porter for attempted murder." A tense silence filled the room. Finally, the marshal sighed. "I will need to hear his side of the story." "Of course you will," Mrs. Winters said icily. "But I am telling you right now, if you let that man walk free, there will be consequences. I have friends in Sacramento, people with influence. This will not be swept under the rug." The marshal left, looking troubled. After he was gone, Mrs. Winters turned to Kate with a determined expression. "I need to send some telegrams. There is a women's advocacy group in Sacramento that helps with situations like this. They have lawyers, resources. We are going to fight this properly." Kate felt overwhelmed by the woman's fierce protectiveness. "Why are you doing all this for me? You do not even know me." "Mrs." Winters' expression softened. "Because no woman should have to endure what you endured, and because I was once in a similar situation many years ago. My first husband was a brutal man. I survived only because my father intervened and took me away. Not every woman has someone willing to stand up for her. But you do now. You have me and Mr. Crawford here, and we are not going to let that husband of yours get away with what he did." Zachariah had been quiet during the marshal's visit, but now he spoke up. "I need to stay in town for a while. Make sure Kate stays safe. Is there a place I can get a room?" "You can stay here," Mrs. Winters said. I have an extra room on the first floor. Normally, I do not take male boarders, but I think we can make an exception given the circumstances." Over the following days, the situation in Independence grew increasingly tense. Benjamin Porter denied everything, of course. He went before the town council and painted himself as the victim, a devoted husband whose unstable wife had run off and was now making wild accusations to cover her own shameful behavior. Some people believed him. Others, particularly the women who had seen Kate's injuries with their own eyes, did not. The town split into factions, and ugly rumors flew on both sides. Zachariah stayed close to Mrs. Winter's house, leaving only to tend to sage or purchase supplies. He did not trust Benjamin Porter not to try something. The man was desperate, his reputation hanging by a thread. Desperate men did foolish things. On the fourth day after their return, Zachariah's instincts proved correct. He was in the stable behind Mrs. Winter's house, brushing down sage, when he heard angry voices from the front of the property. He moved quickly to the front yard and found Benjamin Porter on the porch, pounding on the door and demanding that his wife come out. He was a handsome man in his early 30s, well-dressed and prosperous looking, but there was something cruel in the set of his mouth. When he saw Zachariah approaching, his eyes narrowed. "You," he spat. "You are the one who has been filling my wife's head with lies." "The only lies being told are yours," Zachariah said evenly. "I suggest you leave before I make you leave." Benjamin laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think you can threaten me? I own half this town. I have friends in high places. You are just a drifter, a nobody. Maybe so, but I am a nobody who knows what you did, and I am not going to let you hurt Kate again." Benjamin's face flushed with rage. "She is my wife. What happens between us is none of your concern. When you beat a woman and leave her to die in the snow, it becomes everyone's concern." Benjamin took a step forward, his hands clenching into fists. Zachariah stood his ground, ready. But before things could escalate further, the door opened and Mrs. Winters appeared, holding a shotgun with the comfortable familiarity of someone who knew how to use it. "Benjamin Porter, you get off my property right now, or I will shoot you for trespassing," she said calmly. Benjamin looked at the shotgun, then at Mrs. Winters' determined face, and seemed to recalculate his options. "This is not over," he said, backing away. "Kate is still my wife. Legally, and in the eyes of God, she belongs to me." "No one belongs to you," Zachariah said quietly. "The sooner you understand that, the better off you will be." Benjamin turned and stalked away, but not before shooting one last venomous glare over his shoulder. Zachariah watched until he was out of sight, then turned to Mrs. Winters. "Thank you for the backup." She lowered the shotgun with a grim smile. "That man is dangerous. We need to be vigilant." That night, Kate could not sleep. She lay in the comfortable bed in Mrs. Winter's guest room, staring at the ceiling and listening to the house settle around her. She kept thinking about Benjamin's voice, the rage in it. He would not give up easily, even if the law somehow sided with her, which seemed unlikely given the attitudes of the time. He would find a way to punish her for defying him. She was trapped in a terrible situation, with no clear way out. A soft knock on her door startled her. "Kate, are you awake?" It was Zachariah's voice. "Yes," she called softly. He opened the door slightly. "I saw your light was still on. I wanted to make sure you were all right after what happened today. Can you come in, just for a moment?" Kate was not sure why she asked. It was highly improper for a man to be in her room, even with Mrs. Winter's house being a respectable boarding establishment, but she needed to not be alone with her thoughts. Zachariah entered, leaving the door open for propriety, and sat in the chair by the window. In the lamplight, his face was all planes and angles, strong and solid. Kate studied him from her position on the bed. "I am scared," she admitted. "Benjamin is not going to stop. Even if the marshal arrests him, even if there is a trial, his friends will make sure nothing happens to him. And then I will be right back where I started, only worse because he will be even angrier." Zachariah was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What if you left Independence, started over somewhere new where Benjamin could not find you? I have no money, no skills that would earn me enough to live on. Where would I go? What would I do?" "You could come with me," Zachariah said, and even he seemed surprised by the words as they left his mouth. "I am leaving in a few days, heading up to Montana Territory. There is work up there, land to be had. You could start fresh." Kate stared at him. "You are asking me to run away with you. We barely know each other." I know, it is a crazy idea. But Kate, I have been thinking about this for days now. I cannot stand the thought of leaving you here, vulnerable to that man. And He paused, as if struggling with what to say next. I find myself caring about what happens to you, more than I probably should, given how we met. But I cannot seem to help it. Kate's heart was racing. What he was suggesting was outrageous, improper, and potentially dangerous. If they were caught traveling together without being married, both their reputations would be destroyed. But then, her reputation was likely ruined anyway. And the alternative was staying here, living in fear, waiting for Benjamin to strike again. I care about you too, she said softly. You saved my life. You have been kind to me when you had no reason to be. But, Zachariah, I cannot ask you to upend your life for me. You do not owe me anything. I am not doing this out of obligation, he said, leaning forward in the chair. I am doing this because when I think about riding out of independence without you, I feel wrong inside. Like I would be leaving something important behind. The intensity in his gray eyes made Kate's breath catch. In that moment, she understood that what was growing between them was more than just gratitude or circumstance. It was something real, something that had the potential to become deep and lasting if they gave it a chance. If I go with you, people will talk, she said. They will assume we are... She trailed off, blushing despite everything. Then we make it legitimate, Zachariah said. We get married, a real marriage, legal and proper. I know it is fast, I know we do not know each other well yet. But Kate, I cannot think of a better way to protect you and to maybe find something good out of all this darkness. Kate's mind was reeling. Marriage to Zachariah would be so different from her marriage to Benjamin. She could see that already in the way he treated her, the way he looked at her. There was respect there, genuine care. But could she trust it? Could she trust any man after what she had endured? As if reading her thoughts, Zachariah said gently, I would never hurt you, Kate. I would never raise a hand to you or force you to do anything you did not want to do. I give you my word on that, and my word is the only thing I have that is worth anything in this world. Kate looked at this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known she was praying. He was offering her freedom, safety, and the possibility of something more. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Yes, she said, the word escaping before she could second-guess herself. Yes, I will marry you. The smile that spread across Zachariah's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He stood and crossed to the bed, taking her hand gently in his. We will do this right, he promised. We will get married here in Independence, in front of witnesses, so there can be no question about its legitimacy. Then we will leave for Montana and build a life together. A good life. Kate squeezed his hand, feeling hope bloom in her chest like a flower pushing through snow. A good life, she echoed. I think I would like that very much. The next morning, they told Mrs. Winters of their plans. The older woman regarded them both with shrewd eyes, then nodded slowly. It is a practical solution to a difficult problem, she said, but I hope it will be more than that for both of you. Marriage should be built on more than just necessity. It already is, Zachariah said, glancing at Kate with warmth in his eyes. I think it has been from the moment I found her in that snow. Mrs. Winters smiled. Then you have my blessing. Let us make the arrangements quickly before Benjamin finds out and tries to interfere. He will claim you are still married to him, of course. Can he stop us? Kate asked worriedly. Not if we move fast enough. You are separated from him. You have credible accusations of abuse, and the town is divided on who to believe. In the eyes of many, your marriage to him is already finished. We just need to make your new marriage official before he can rally enough support to block it. Over the next 2 days, preparations moved with surprising speed. Mrs. Winters contacted a sympathetic judge who agreed to perform the ceremony. She also sent word to the women's advocacy group in Sacramento, explaining the situation and requesting their legal assistance in formally dissolving Kate's marriage to Benjamin. Several of Mrs. Winters' friends rallied around Kate, providing a proper dress for the wedding and offering their support. The community of women in Independence might be small, but they were fierce in protecting one of their own. Benjamin, of course, was furious when he learned of the impending marriage. He tried to get Marshall Thorne to stop it, claiming that Kate was his wife and therefore could not legally marry another man. But the judge pointed out that Benjamin had not pressed charges against Kate for desertion or adultery, which would have been his legal recourse if he truly believed she was still his wife. His failure to do so suggested that even he acknowledged the marriage was effectively over. It was a thin legal argument, but it was enough. The wedding took place in Mrs. Winter's parlor on a cold but clear morning. Kate wore a simple blue dress that brought out the honey color of her eyes. The bruises on her face had faded to yellow and green, still visible but healing. Zachariah wore his best clothes, which were still worn and rough but clean. He looked handsome and strong and steady as he stood beside her, and Kate felt her heart swell with emotions she had not expected to feel again. The judge performed a brief ceremony, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, Zachariah kissed Kate gently, carefully, as if she were something precious that might break. Kate kissed him back, tasting hope and promise and the beginning of something new. When they broke apart, Mrs. Winters and her friends were wiping away tears and applauding. "You take care of her," Mrs. Winters told Zachariah sternly, "or you will answer to me." "Yes, madam," Zachariah said solemnly. "I give you my word." They left Independence the next morning at dawn, before most of the town was awake. It seemed wiser to slip away quietly than to risk another confrontation with Benjamin. Mrs. Winters had given Kate a small purse of money and some traveling supplies, hugging her tightly before they left. "You write to me when you get settled," she ordered. "Let me know you are safe and happy." "I will," Kate promised, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for everything. I will never forget what you did for me. Just live well, my dear. That is the best thanks you can give me." Zachariah and Kate rode out of Independence as the sun rose over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Kate rode behind Zachariah on Sage, her arms wrapped around his waist, her cheek resting against his back. With each mile they put between themselves and the town, she felt lighter, as if a great weight was lifting from her shoulders. She was leaving behind Benjamin, the pain, the fear. She was riding towards something new, something that was hers to build. The journey to Montana Territory took 3 weeks. They traveled slowly, camping under the stars and in small towns along the way. During those weeks, Kate and Zachariah began to truly know each other. They talked about everything, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Kate told him about her parents, kind people who had wanted a better life for their daughter. Zachariah told her about growing up on a farm in Missouri, about the hard work and the feeling that there had to be more to life than plowing the same fields his father and grandfather had plowed. They learned each other's habits and quirks. Kate discovered that Zachariah was an early riser who liked to watch the sun come up with a cup of coffee in his hands. Zachariah learned that Kate had a quick wit and a talent for storytelling that made even the dullest parts of the journey interesting. Slowly, carefully, they built trust between them. Zachariah never pushed her for physical intimacy beyond the chaste kisses they shared. He seemed to understand that she needed time to heal, both physically and emotionally. Kate appreciated his patience more than she could say. As they traveled north, the landscape changed. The mountains gave way to rolling plains and the air grew colder. They passed through small settlements and trading posts, occasionally stopping to purchase supplies or hear news. In one town, they learned that Montana Territory was indeed opening up for homesteading, with land available for those willing to work it. The news excited Zachariah, and he talked enthusiastically about the possibility of claiming land and building a ranch. Kate found herself caught up in his vision, imagining a home of their own, a place where they could put down roots and build something lasting. One night, about 2 weeks into their journey, they made camp beside a small stream. The evening was clear and mild for early March, and after they had eaten a simple dinner of beans and bacon, they sat by the fire and watched the stars emerge one by one. Kate was wrapped in a blanket, sitting close enough to Zachariah that their shoulders touched. "Are you happy?" Zachariah asked suddenly. Kate considered the question. A month ago, she would not have believed happiness was possible for her. But now, looking at the stars and feeling the warmth of the fire and the solid presence of the man beside her, she realized that she was. "Yes," she said softly. "I am. Are you?" "More than I have been in a long time," Zachariah admitted. "I spent a lot of years drifting, never really belonging anywhere. But with you, I feel like I have found something I did not even know I was looking for." Kate turned to look at him, seeing his face in the firelight. "What is that?" "Home," he said simply. "You feel like home to me, Kate." The words hit Kate square in the chest, so full of simple truth that they took her breath away. She reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "You feel like home to me, too," she whispered. That night, in their tent under the vast Montana sky, Kate and Zachariah became husband and wife in truth as well as in name. Zachariah was patient and gentle, and Kate felt something inside her that Benjamin had broken begin to heal. This was what love could be, she realized. Not control or violence, but tenderness and respect and mutual care. Afterward, she lay in Zachariah's arms and cried, not from sadness, but from relief. She was free, truly free, and she had found someone worth being free with. They reached the settlement of Helena, Montana, in late March. It was a rough, bustling town that had grown up around gold mining, but it was also becoming a center for ranching and agriculture. The land office was doing brisk business, with settlers streaming in to file claims under the Homestead Act. Zachariah and Kate spent several days in Helena, gathering information and supplies. They learned that good grazing land was available about 30 miles north, near the Prickly Pear Valley. It was remote but beautiful, with water sources and plenty of grass for cattle. Zachariah filed a claim for 160 acres, the maximum allowed under the homestead laws. Then they purchased the supplies they would need to build a cabin and sustain themselves through the coming seasons. It took most of their money, but Zachariah was confident they could make it work. He had experience with cattle and knew how to work the land. Kate was a hard worker and a quick learner. Together, they would build something worthwhile. The land Zachariah had claimed was everything he had described. It sat in a gentle valley with a clear stream running through it, surrounded by rolling hills covered in grass. There were stands of pine and aspen that would provide timber for building, and the soil looked rich. Kate stood on a small rise and looked out over the land, imagining what it could become. A house, a barn, fields and fences, cattle grazing peacefully. It seemed almost too good to be true. "What do you think?" Zachariah asked, coming to stand beside her. "I think it is perfect," Kate said, and she meant it. They set to work immediately. Spring was advancing, and they needed to get a cabin built before the summer heat set in. Zachariah felled trees and shaped logs, while Kate cleared the ground and gathered stones for a foundation. It was back-breaking work, but there was a satisfaction in it that Kate had never felt before. She was building something that was hers, creating a life with her own hands. At night, they were too exhausted to do anything but eat and fall asleep in each other's arms in the tent they had set up. But even in her exhaustion, Kate felt a deep contentment. Over the weeks and months that followed, the cabin took shape. It was not large or fancy, just a single room with a loft for sleeping, but it was solid and well built. Zachariah proved to be skilled with his hands, and Kate learned quickly under his patient instruction. By early June, they had a roof over their heads and a door that closed. They spent their first night in the cabin lying on blankets in front of the fireplace, talking quietly about their plans for the future. "We need to get some cattle soon," Zachariah said. "Start building a herd before winter comes." "How many can we afford?" Kate asked. "Maybe 10 or 12 head to start. If we are careful, we can grow the herd over time. In a few years, we could have a decent operation going." Kate smiled in the darkness. "A few years? I like the sound of that. Like we have time, like we can plan for the future." "We do have time," Zachariah said, pulling her closer. "We have all the time in the world." The summer passed in a blur of hard work and simple pleasures. Zachariah made a trip back to Helena and returned with 12 head of cattle, mostly young heifers with good breeding potential. They built a corral and a small barn to shelter the animals during bad weather. Kate planted a garden and tended it carefully, coaxing vegetables from the rich soil. They hunted and fished to supplement their food stores, and Kate learned to shoot a rifle with surprising accuracy. As the months passed, Kate felt herself changing. The frightened, broken woman who had nearly died in the snow seemed like a distant memory. In her place was someone stronger, more confident. She laughed often now, delighted by small things like a successful garden harvest or a particularly beautiful sunset. Zachariah loved to hear her laugh, and he went out of his way to make her happy. Their relationship deepened into something solid and unshakable, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. In late September, Kate realized she was pregnant. At first, she was not sure, but as the signs became unmistakable, joy and fear warred within her. She wanted a child, wanted to raise a family with Zachariah, but pregnancy was dangerous, especially out here, so far from doctors or help, and the memories of her time with Benjamin sometimes still haunted her nightmares. What if she could not be a good mother? What if her past damaged her child? She told Zachariah one evening as they sat by the fire after supper. He was quiet for a long moment, and Kate's heart sank, thinking he was not pleased. But then he reached out and pulled her into his lap, holding her close. "A baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Kate, that is amazing. Are you happy about it?" "Yes," Kate said. "But I am scared too." "So am I," Zachariah admitted. "I do not know the first thing about being a father, but we will figure it out together, the same way we have figured out everything else." Kate rested her head on his shoulder, feeling his strength surround her. "Together," she agreed. The winter that followed was harsh, with deep snows and bitter cold, but the cabin was snug, and they had plenty of food stored away. Zachariah spent his days tending the cattle and keeping the fires burning. Kate worked on sewing baby clothes and preparing for the arrival of their child. Her body changed and grew, and Zachariah was endlessly fascinated by the process, resting his hand on her belly to feel the baby kick. They talked for hours about what kind of parents they wanted to be, what values they wanted to instill in their children. It brought them even closer together, cementing their partnership. In early April of 1879, as the snow was beginning to melt and the first hints of spring were appearing, Kate went into labor. It was a difficult birth, lasting through the night and into the next day. Zachariah stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and offering what comfort he could. He had ridden to the nearest neighbor's homestead, about 10 miles away, and brought back Mrs. Margaret Carson, an older woman who had experience with birthing. Mrs. Carson proved invaluable, calm, and capable as she coached Kate through the process. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, Kate gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She held him in her arms, exhausted but elated, and looked up at Zachariah with tears streaming down her face. Zachariah stared at his son with an expression of absolute wonder, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand with one calloused finger. "He is perfect," Zachariah whispered. "Kate, he is perfect." They named him Jacob William Crawford, Jacob for Zachariah's father, and William for Kate's. As Kate recovered from the birth and they adjusted to life with a baby, Kate found herself marveling at how much her life had changed in just over a year. She had gone from being trapped in an abusive marriage to building a loving family of her own. She had gone from having no hope to having more hope than she knew what to do with. The years that followed were not always easy. Ranching was hard work, and there were setbacks and challenges, droughts, harsh winters, cattle losses, financial struggles. But through it all, Kate and Zachariah faced everything together. Their love deepened and matured, becoming a bedrock that they could build their lives upon. They added to their family a daughter named Grace in 1881 and another son named Thomas in 1883. The cabin was expanded to accommodate their growing family, and the ranch prospered gradually. Kate never heard from Benjamin Porter again. Through occasional letters from Mrs. Winters, she learned that Benjamin's reputation and independence had been destroyed by the scandal. His store failed, and he left town in disgrace. Kate felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only relief that he was far away and could never hurt her again. She sent regular letters to Mrs. Winters, keeping her updated on her life and family, and the older woman wrote back with news and encouragement. As the children grew, Kate and Zachariah made sure to teach them about kindness, respect, and the value of hard work. Jacob grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with the cattle. Grace was spirited and curious, always asking questions and exploring the ranch. Thomas was the baby, cheerful and affectionate, adored by his older siblings. The Crawford family became well known in the area for their hospitality and integrity. Neighbors knew they could count on Zachariah and Kate for help when times were hard. On a spring evening in 1890, Kate stood on the porch of their expanded house and looked out over the land. The ranch had grown considerably over the years. They now had over 100 head of cattle, several horses, and fields of hay for winter feed. The children were playing in the yard, their laughter carried on the breeze. Zachariah came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Kate leaned back against him, savoring the warmth and solidity of his presence. I am thinking about how far we have come. Do you remember that night you found me in the snow? I will never forget it, Zachariah said quietly. Finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me. Kate turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. There were lines around his eyes now, gray threading through his dark hair. He was 38 years old, and she was 34. They had lived a lifetime together in the 12 years since that snowy night. You saved my life that night, Kate said softly. But you did more than that. You gave me a reason to live. You gave me love and respect and a family. You gave me a home. Zachariah kissed her, slow and sweet and full of everything they had built together. We gave each other those things, he said when they broke apart. We built this life together, Kate. Everything we have, everything we are, we made it happen through hard work and faith in each other. Kate smiled, her heart so full she thought it might burst. He was right. They had taken the worst circumstances and turned them into something beautiful. Out of pain and fear, they had created love and family and a future worth living for. As the sun set over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Kate and Zachariah stood together on their porch, watching their children play. Behind them, the house was warm and welcoming, filled with the evidence of their life together. Photographs on the walls, children's toys scattered about, the smell of bread baking in the oven. It was everything Kate had never dared to dream of during those dark years with Benjamin. The children came running up to the porch as the evening grew darker, tired from their play and ready for supper. Jacob, now 11, was tall for his age and already showing signs of the man he would become. Grace, at 9, was chattering excitedly about a bird's nest she had found. Thomas, 7 years old with a gap-toothed grin, wrapped his arms around Kate's waist and declared he was starving. Zachariah laughed and scooped Thomas up, swinging him around as the boys shrieked with delight. "Let us get you fed then, before you waste away to nothing." They went inside as a family, and Kate prepared supper while Zachariah helped the children wash up. Around the table, they shared the events of their day, everyone talking over each other in the comfortable chaos of a loving family. Kate watched her husband and children with a sense of profound gratitude. This was her life now. These were her people, her home, her joy. After the children were in bed, Kate and Zachariah sat together by the fire, as they did most evenings. Zachariah was working on repairing a bridle, and Kate was mending one of Jacob's shirts. The domestic scene was so normal, so peaceful, that it still sometimes took Kate's breath away. She had fought so hard for this normalcy, this peace. She would never take it for granted. "I received a letter from Mrs. Winters today," Kate said, breaking the comfortable silence. "She is thinking about coming to visit this summer." Zachariah looked up with a smile. "That would be wonderful. The children would love to meet her, and I would like to thank her properly for everything she did for us. She says Independence has changed a lot. A new marshal, new businesses. Benjamin's store building was sold and turned into a hotel. Does it bother you, hearing about the town?" Zachariah asked gently. Kate considered the question. "No," she said finally. "That part of my life feels like it happened to someone else. I am not that frightened woman anymore. I am Kate Crawford, rancher's wife, mother of 3. That is who I am now." Zachariah set aside his work and moved to sit beside her on the settee. He took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "You were never that frightened woman," he said. "Even in your darkest moment, when I found you in the snow, you were a survivor. You just needed a chance to show it." Kate squeezed his hand, overwhelmed with love for this man who had seen her worth when she could not see it herself. "We make a good team," she said. "The best team," Zachariah agreed. As the fire burned low and the night deepened around them, Kate reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the pain she had endured, the fear, the moment when she had truly believed she would die in that frozen wilderness. But she also thought about everything that had come after. The kindness of a stranger who became her husband, the strength she discovered within herself, the family she had built, and the love that surrounded her every day. Life was not always easy. There were still hard days, challenges to overcome, worries about the future. But Kate faced them all with courage born from survival, with the knowledge that she had already overcome the worst and come out stronger, and she never faced anything alone. Zachariah was always beside her, her partner in every sense of the word. Mrs. Winters did visit that summer, arriving in a hired wagon with enough luggage for a month-long stay. The children were initially shy around the formidable older woman, but she won them over quickly with her warmth and the peppermint candies she produced from her reticule. She spent her days helping Kate with the household work and telling the children stories about their mother's bravery. In the evenings, she and Kate would sit on the porch and talk, while Zachariah worked with the children on their lessons, or played with them in the yard. "You have done well for yourself, Mrs. Bolt," Winters told Kate one evening as they watched the sunset. "This is a good life you have built." "I could not have done it without you," Kate said. "If you had not taken me in, if you had not stood up for me, I do not know what would have happened." Mrs. Winters patted her hand. "You would have found a way. You are stronger than you think, my dear. But I am glad I could help. Seeing you here, with your family, so happy and thriving, that is all the thanks I need." When Mrs. Winters left at the end of August, she hugged Kate tightly and whispered, "You make sure that man of yours knows how lucky he is." "I think he knows," Kate said with a smile, "but I will remind him anyway." The years continued to pass, each one adding to the tapestry of their life together. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Jacob grew into a fine young man who eventually married a neighbor's daughter and started his own ranch nearby. Grace became a schoolteacher, clever and determined, making a difference in the lives of the children she taught. Thomas surprised everyone by becoming interested in law, eventually going east to study and returning to Montana as a lawyer dedicated to helping ranchers and homesteaders. Kate and Zachariah grew older together, their hair turning gray, their hands becoming gnarled with age and work. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared experiences and weathered storms. They became grandparents, delighting in the next generation of Crawfords. They faced losses too, the death of friends and neighbors, hard years that tested their resolve. But through it all, they had each other. On a winter evening in 1908, 30 years after Zachariah had found Kate in the snow, they sat together in their parlor. It was a different house now, larger and more comfortable than the original cabin, though that cabin still stood on the property as a testament to where they had started. Kate was working on a quilt for their newest grandchild, and Zachariah was reading a newspaper that was already a week old by the time it reached them. "Listen to this," Zachariah said, looking up from the paper. "They are talking about Montana becoming a state. Been a state for nearly 20 years now, but they are reflecting on how much has changed. Says here that Montana went from wild frontier to settled civilization in just a generation. We were part of that," Kate said. "We helped settle this land, build this community. It is strange to think about sometimes, how much the world has changed." Zachariah set down the paper and looked at his wife, seeing the girl she had been and the woman she had become, all in one glance. "Do you have any regrets, Kate, about the life we have lived?" Kate set down her quilting and met his eyes. "Not a single one," she said firmly. "This life, this family, everything we have built together, it has been more than I ever dreamed possible. You gave me that, Zachariah. You gave me a chance when I had nothing, and you stood by me through everything." "You gave me just as much," Zachariah said, reaching for her hand. "Before I found you, I was just drifting, no real purpose or direction. You gave me a reason to put down roots, to build something lasting. You gave me a family and a home, and a love I did not know existed." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, hands clasped, thinking about all the years behind them and whatever time they had left ahead. Kate thought about that terrified woman in the snow, beaten and left to die. She thought about the cowboy who had refused to let her go, who had kept her warm until she woke, and she thought about everything that had grown from that moment, all the love and life and family that had sprung from such dark beginnings. "I love you," Kate said softly. "I have loved you from the moment you wrapped me in your coat and refused to let me die. I will love you until my last breath." Zachariah stood and pulled Kate to her feet, wrapping his arms around her in an embrace that still felt as right as it had 3 decades ago. "And I love you," he said. "Finding you was the best thing I ever did. Marrying you was the smartest decision I ever made. Building this life with you has been the greatest adventure." They kissed, and in that kiss was everything they had been through together. The fear and pain of the beginning, the joy and love of all the years since, the hope and contentment of the present moment. When they broke apart, They were both smiling. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, soft flakes drifting down from the dark sky. Kate watched through the window, remembering another snowfall in another time. But that snow had been violent and deadly, meant to be her grave. This snow was gentle, peaceful, blanketing the world they had built in quiet white. It was the same element, but the context made all the difference. "Let us go to bed," Zachariah said, taking her hand. "We have another full day tomorrow." Kate followed him up the stairs, secure in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. That was what their life had always been about. Facing things together, standing by each other, building something beautiful out of whatever circumstances they were given. It was not always easy, but it was always worth it. That was the truth Kate had learned in the 30 years since Zachariah had found her in the snow and kept her warm until she finally woke. Real love, true partnership, was about choosing each other every single day. And she and Zachariah had made that choice thousands of times, in big ways and small, until it had become as natural as breathing. They went to sleep that night as they had for 3 decades, wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for another day together, and hopeful for all the days to come. The snow continued to fall through the night, covering the ranch in white, but inside the Crawford house, all was warm and peaceful. 2 people who had found each other in the worst of circumstances had built the best of lives. And that, Kate thought as she drifted off to sleep with her husband's heartbeat steady beneath her ear, was more than enough. It was everything.